in all of your organizations. COVID has certainly presented us with new challenges, and ahead of that, we had embarked upon a strategic planning process that we were in the process of implementing in early of January 2020. So timing is everything, right? And so what you're going to see here with this RFP that Christy's going to walk you through is an identification of not only that strategic planning process, but also the things that we have noted as it relates to COVID. Just as sort of a couple of housekeeping issues, want to let you know that we want you to enter your questions in the chat box. Jerome is going to be monitoring that chat. And the questions that are sort of simplistic, if you will, we'll provide answer for today. For answers that are maybe more complex, and we think that people may have, there may be people who are on this call, who are not on this call, who may be applying for the funding. We want to be able to put that on the FAQ page, and we want to be certain that we're thoughtful about the answer that we're giving you. So in some cases, if your questions rise to that level, we ask you to bear with us while we do that proper due diligence and make sure we get you a clear, crisp answer. But you are off to an exciting journey. We are super, super excited about the product that Christy's going to roll out to you today. We hope you are too. And have a good session, everyone. Christy, Jerome, I leave you to it. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Trina. I appreciate that. That was a great intro.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Trina has another meeting to get to, so she was a guest star for a few moments and then she leaves us be. So I'm going to share my screen, and then I have a slide deck that I will walk you through. Okay. So can I, Jerome, can you confirm for me? Are you seeing my opening slide right now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Also, just as one other housekeeping note that you maybe noticed that I forgot this until halfway through Trina was talking, we will be recording this session. So don't tell us anything you don't want everyone to know, because we'll be posting this on our website afterward for anyone who can't join us today. So let me walk you through what we're going to be talking about today. So Trina did a lot of my introduction for me, which is great in many ways. But as she said, I am Dr. Christy Panagakis, and I work as the Director of Research and Evaluation at United Way. In many ways, I feel like the best way I can explain my role in this process is to think of me almost as the cruise director of sorts here, that I am the one who is pulling many different pieces throughout United Way together to build this RFP itself. So I am very knowledgeable about the contents of the RFP, the process you'll go through, the application itself. But kind of like Trina mentioned, some of the real subject matter expertise that lives with my colleagues. And so there may be questions today that I'm just not going to be able to answer. So in that case, what will happen is I will go back, I'll get those answers from my colleagues, and it'll be shared publicly on our FAQ page. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And if you have questions for me at any point, please email me at this programfunding@uwbec.org email address. I know, kind of like Trina mentioned before, a lot of you are probably used to working with our colleague, Nicole. And so that's, I would imagine it's muscle memory for you at this point, that I have a question, I go to Nicole. And so with this change, we're really trying to push people to use this program funding email address so that no matter which staff member is tasked with, overseeing this process, your muscle memory always takes you to an email address that someone will be staffing. So it's not this confusion of who do I email this time for that sort of thing. So please just make sure you're using this, for any questions you have along the way. So what are we going to be doing today? We've already started with some introductions. I've introduced myself, but also I want to introduce United Way a little bit, because I know there's some of you on the call that maybe aren't that familiar with who we are. So I want to make sure that I give you a little bit of background about who we are as an organization and kind of where we're heading. Then I have a series of important information that I'll share with you. Then I'm going to go through some of your previously submitted questions. Some of you know that if you were registered as of last Friday, I emailed everyone who was registered at that time and said, if you have questions, send them to me in advance, because I could see what an overwhelming response we were having. And so we've got 100 people on the call right now. And you know how unwieldy it can get to have 100 people trying to ask questions in real time. And I didn't want that memorialized on a video that everyone could see. So I figured it'd be easier to have you submit some questions in advance. So I'll go through some of those, but then I'm also going to make space for some new questions as well. But like Trina said, and I said a moment ago, the questions we're really going to cover today are going to focus more at the high level and more on things that will be applicable to the largest proportion of people on the call. So a lot of really specific stuff we may not get to. I also, as you might know, I've blocked out this meeting from 9:30 to 11 a.m. I don't know that we're going to take that entire time. Questions are such a flexible thing that I couldn't anticipate. So I tried to be generous and build in extra time, but we might end up, ending a little bit early today if we get to the point where we've covered all the high level stuff. So know that in many ways, this is a flexible session. We're just going to kind of feel it out as we go together and figure out, what works for this group of people. So still in the introduction section, I wanted to start with looking at our mission and our vision. And so some of these probably are familiar to you, there we go, I had to move so I could see our mission. Our mission is we bring people, organizations, and resources together to create systemic community change. You might see that, we have that on our letterhead, we have that on our website. This may be familiar to you. Similarly with our vision statement, you've maybe seen this before as well, that we envision an equitable, thriving, and united community achieved through collaborative leadership. So, these are the things that we print everywhere. But I also wanted to take a moment to talk about who are we in a less formal way. And so we've kind of alluded to this already. Trina said it as well. We released our last RFP in April of 2018. And you think about that was genuinely for all of us a different world in so many ways. It feels like a lifetime ago. And so because the world is different now, we know that we need to be growing and changing and evolving to meet the way that the world has changed around us. But something that's really important, and I want to reiterate this throughout the conversation, is that right alongside you, we are still learning and growing as an organization. We're experiencing this at the same time as all of your organizations. And so we're doing our best to really figure out how to meet this moment, how to figure out how does United Way meet the needs of Erie County, but we're figuring it out as well. And so I say that to really remind you that we don't have all the answers, and also to say, sometimes we need a little bit of grace as we're figuring it out as well. So we're not perfect as an organization, but we try really hard and we're going to keep trying really hard. And then another change, as a result of especially the last 18 months, as a result of the pandemic, as a result of the murder of George Floyd, our work is shifting, and all of our work, not just these funded programs themselves, really have an increased focus on acknowledging and addressing systemic inequities. We are in a moment that has revealed to many of us, we maybe already knew this, but it feels like the world has caught up to say, there are such inequities in our society that we need to meet them. And so United Way is really trying to make sure that in everything we do, we are seeing those and we are addressing those. So this is a little bit more of a step forward from where we were before, because we want to meet the moment. We knew it was time that we had to be moving forward. So that's just a little bit about who we are, at our fancy formal level, and then also a little bit more in a colloquial sense, who are we as an organization as we sit here today? So now I'm going to move into what I mentioned in the overview, was just important information. Largely, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to read the RFP to you. I'm not going to really look at things that are already available to you. I really wanted to use this time together today to talk about things that maybe aren't as obvious. So most of this is going to be, it's not going to be the information that's already in the document itself, just so you know. So really critical is that all of the information you will ever need with respect to this RFP will be found at this website at the top, uwbec.org/funding. I would honestly say bookmark it for the next 5-6 weeks, because that's where we are putting everything. Later today, that's where we're going to post a recording of this information session. That's where our FAQ page lives that we are regularly updating. I'm going to try as best as I can to, by the end of the day today, have it updated with the questions that we talk about in this session, but you'll keep seeing it updated. We've also got the RFP itself, that document itself is on this page, as well as when you're ready to submit your application, you will go to that page to find the online application. So this is really your most critical hub where you'll find everything you need. So also, all of this is in the RFP, but this is important enough that I'm willing to repeat it again, that here are a few really important dates that you want to note. Applications are due no later than Friday, October 29th at 4 p.m. You are certainly welcome to submit earlier. I would love if you would submit them earlier, but just know that you don't have to wait until that day. If you, a few days earlier, feel confident, you know what, I've got this, I feel good about it, absolutely submit it, cross it off your to-do list, but we won't accept them any later than 4 p.m. on Friday, October 29th. We do plan to make our preliminary funding decisions and announce them in March of 2022. And then this funding starts on July 1st, 2022, and it will run through June 30th, 2024. So we've set this up in a way that we don't intend for there to be any interruption between the funding we currently have going out and when this next cycle starts. So kind of like I said before, I've tried to do a lot of level set here to say that we're growing, we're changing, we're evolving. And so there are some notable changes from last cycle. If you're someone who has worked with us before, if you're new to us, this all feels new, it all feels like change. But for those of you that are a little more familiar, here are a couple important things that you want to know. So first, we have 7 focus areas that you can apply in. You apply to one focus area: early learning and development, school age learning, employment and workforce development, financial capability and asset building, healthy birth outcomes, childhood obesity, and trauma-informed care. A big change from last time is that all of these focus areas are open for applications. If you've worked with us in the past, you might remember that in our last cycle, we had some focus areas where you could apply, and we had some focus areas where you could only submit an application if you were already funded in that area. We've done away with that model, and we've moved now to every area is open for any applicant to submit. Also, just kind of reiterating the point that I made a few slides ago, we have this increased focus on acknowledging and addressing systemic inequities. This is really of critical importance to us as we look for where to put our funding, to where to try to make the biggest impact in Erie County. Something else here is that you may have noticed already, if you've taken a look at the application itself, that there's a 5,000 character limit on narrative questions. That does not mean, I beg of you, you don't have to write 5,000 characters for every single answer. Our thought process there with really opening this up a little bit is because we've heard from a lot of you that the character limit can get tough and you're trying to figure out, well, I've got a 7-letter word. Can I make it into a 5-letter word? Do I really need that comma? Do I really need that period? And so we just wanted to make it easier on you to say you don't have to worry about that. You have plenty of space to write the strongest application possible, but you're not expected to use the full space every time. And I would strongly encourage you not to. I don't always think that longer answers are better answers. So really, just because we've made the space, please don't feel compelled to feel like you have to include every single thought, everything about your organization. We still want you to really write the strongest, most compelling application that you can. And then also, as you may have noticed, in the application itself, when you look in the RFP document, the scoring rubric is included. This was really critical to us to be as transparent as we could possibly be in this part of the process, because we didn't want you as applicants to feel like you were having to guess for what would be a strong answer, a compelling answer. It was really important to us that we show you this is exactly the document that reviewers will use when they're looking at your applications. So there's no guessing what's in our heads in any way. And what that also means, if you're familiar with us, you might remember this in the past, is that historically, when we got to the point where reviewers were looking at applications, we would have what we called a question volley. And so the reviewers would look at an application and they would say, I'm not really sure exactly what the applicant meant by this. Could we get more clarification? We've removed that back and forth because we've given you exactly how we're going to be evaluating the applications. So there's nothing hidden, there's nothing behind closed doors here. This is really our opportunity to show you and to offer to you, this is what we're looking for to help you write the strongest application you possibly can. So at this point, I'm going to move us into looking at some of the questions that were submitted over the last week. And this is a note, we've talked about this a few times, but I feel like I can't hammer it home enough. We've gotten some really detailed questions about the focus areas. We really want to use today for questions that are relevant to the largest number of people. If I start talking a lot about one focus area, I know there's a number of you on this call for whom that just won't be relevant. And I really want to be respectful of our time together and try to maximize it in every way. So like I'd said, in some of the questions I'm answering, and also when you start asking questions in real time, the ones we focus on, we're really going to focus on those ones that cover the largest number of people. And like I told you before, I'm not the subject matter expert. So I really want to make sure that rather than having me fumble through an answer and then have my colleagues say, actually, that really wasn't it, you shouldn't have said it that way, I'd rather do my due diligence and talk with my colleagues and get you a really solid, concise answer. And then we'll have that posted on our FAQ page. So like I mentioned to you a few slides ago, when you go to UWBE, so uwbec.org/funding, you'll see the FAQ page. We note right on there the date it was last updated. So really be keeping an eye on that over the next week or so. And a lot of those more specific questions, we're working on getting answers for you. So I got a number of versions of this question. And so I kind of tweaked it a little bit to be a little more overarching. So I got these two questions in particular. So first, how do I know if my program is eligible to apply? I got a lot of versions of, I'm this type of organization, am I eligible? Or I do this, am I eligible? And the most critical thing I can say to you is to look at page 3 of the RFP where we have the eligibility criteria. Kind of like I said to you a moment ago with the scoring rubric, eligibility is the same way. There's no hidden information there. We're not withholding anything from you. So if you look at those eligibility criteria and your organization fits, you are absolutely able to submit an application to us. But then I also got a lot of questions about, well, how do you know if your program is a good fit for our funding? And that's really tough to determine. And it's also hard for me. I will never know your program as well as you know your program. And so it's hard for me to even begin to offer you an answer. So the way I think about it is really the best thing you can do as you're trying to assess, do you feel like you're a good fit, is in the focus area that you're looking to apply to, look at, there's the goal that's written right at the top of that section. Then we have the list of strategies, and then we have the list of outcome measures to choose from. Really think carefully about each of those and try to figure out, can you speak to those compellingly and comprehensively? Do you feel like you can really make a strong case for, yeah, my program does this stuff and we do it well? That's, I think, the best way for me to guide you to think about fit. I really, for a variety of reasons, I can't offer one-off advice because you shouldn't trust me to know because I don't know your program. So really think about, good fit is when you know that you can make a strong, compelling, comprehensive case for why your program matches the work, that we're trying to fund. Kind of similarly, I got 1 or 2 questions about, we ask you to identify, we have that list of strategies, like I mentioned a moment ago. And I got a few questions about, well, how many strategies should I tell you I can do? Is it better if I choose more than one? And this, again, you'll probably be able to tell that I'm a bit of a broken record here, but really use the scoring rubric as your guide as you're trying to craft your application, because that's what reviewers will be using. I know that I'm saying this a lot, but there's no secrets. We're not holding anything back in any way. In evolving as an organization, something that was really critical is that we make ourselves transparent in this process. So really using the scoring rubric is going to help you know, well, would it be better if I do this or that? And then I've said this already too, you want that story to be compelling, you want it to be comprehensive, you want to feel strong about it. And just know that if you're just adding more to add more, but you don't feel like you have as much of a leg to stand on, that's not necessarily going to end up being a better application. So, most simply, what I would say here is really lean on that scoring rubric to guide you. And remember that more is not always going to be better in terms of an application. So now we're getting into, I had some questions about this, is asking, is it your program or is it your organization that needs to be operational since September 1st, 2019 in order to be eligible for our funding? This one has a shorter, simpler answer than the last 2 I talked about. It's your program that you're applying for that needs to be operational since September 1st, 2019. I also got questions about, will we fund more than one program per organization within the same focus area? So if you're doing work that you have multiple programs that fit in one focus area, can you submit applications for both of those? Absolutely. We are very willing to fund multiple programs from one organization within one focus area. So please don't feel like you have to choose between your programs just because they happen to be, aligned in a similar area. If you feel you can submit 2 applications and they're strong, compelling, at this point, you should be like saying it along with me at home, strong, compelling, comprehensive. Absolutely, go for it. We also, this goes along with what I said a moment ago. Can one organization submit more than one application for funding? Absolutely. At the level of your organization, we're happy for you to submit on behalf of multiple programs. However, the thing that we won't accept is that you can't apply for one program multiple times. So you can't apply for your one program in one focus area and then also submit for that same program in a different focus area. That is a place where we ask you to choose where you feel the fit is best. So I had a question about, what happens if your program does work in multiple focus areas? Should you combine them all into one application or submit separate applications? So this is also in line with, the last 2 questions we've talked about. You really want to apply in the one focus area where you feel strongest. However, it's okay in your application to reference your work in the other focus areas. We don't expect you to act like your work is happening in a vacuum, but it's really critical that you do hone in your application and you focus on this focus area with these strategies and these specific outcome measures. Unfortunately, it isn't like a buffet of sorts where you can choose across all of them. You've really got to pick the one that feels strongest and hone in there and apply in that way. Similarly, you can tell I was getting a lot of similar type questions, so that seemed promising that I could kind of see where a lot of your thinking was going. I got questions about, can you reference multiple programs in one application? So just like I said a moment ago, it's absolutely okay to mention other programs within your organization, because I know in many ways they're likely tied into each other and they work together. So it's okay to reference that. It's okay to mention that you've got these other things going on that work with your program. But again, you really want to focus your application largely on the single program for which that application is focused. We also got questions when it comes to the minimum funding amount. So does that $30,000 minimum funding request apply to 1 year of funding or the entire 2-year funding cycle? So that number that you put in, I should know off the top of my head what number that is in the application, and I apologize that I don't. Question 18. Oh, it's in the answer. I should have just read before looking at that. So in question 18, when you answer that question, when you tell us the total amount requested, tell us for 1 year. You don't have to double it. We will do that work, over the course of that 2-year period. So just tell us the amount of funding you're requesting for 1 calendar year. And then you should have already seen this coming because I've talked about this a few times, but every narrative question says 5,000 characters. Are you expected to use all of them? This is another place where I can't see all your faces, but I'm going to imagine that you are saying this along with me at this point. We absolutely don't expect you to use the whole space. It's there if you need it, but longer answers are just not always going to be better answers. So we didn't want you to feel stressed or constrained, with smaller character limits, but also more is just not always going to be better. You want to write compellingly, not just for length. And then we started to get some questions. I have a few that are about specific questions in the application themselves. This answer in particular, this is going to be posted on our FAQ page. So please don't feel like you have to be frantically writing down the answer to this question. It will be posted on our FAQ page. But we got a number of questions about question 29, which asked about partnering with United Way grants or initiatives, and people were looking for clarification for what that meant. So most simply, what we meant by that is, does your program already partner with these specific programmatic initiatives that are spearheaded by United Way of Buffalo and Erie County? And I've got a list here. I'm not going to read it to you. Again, it will be posted on our FAQ page, so please don't panic if you can't write these all down before I move to the next slide. But we are looking for, does your program already work with us on these initiatives that we spearhead? The question is not asking, do you partner with our other funded agencies, or are you part of our volunteer engagement opportunities, such as Day of Caring or Business Meets Community? That's one I heard a number of times. And so I'll make sure, to have that posted very clearly, easy to find on the FAQ. So when you get to that point, you're aware, okay, I know exactly what United Way is asking with this question. And then I also had a question about the last few questions on the application, which are starting to ask questions about demographics. And the question wanted to know, when answering those, should you be answering about your program or your organization? This is something I feel very comfortable telling you. I'll say this, while I'm being recorded, that I didn't even recognize that, oh, that was a great place for us to be a little bit more specific. So like I said at the top, I'm learning right alongside you. We as an organization are learning right alongside you. So this is a place where, we'll be a little more specific with our language next time. But what's critical to know, and this will be posted on our FAQ page as well, is that questions 38, 39, and 40 are focused on the program itself for which you're applying, while questions 41 and 42 are focused on your organization itself. So same thing, don't worry about frantically writing this down. We will make that easy for you to find on the FAQ page. And so at this point, Jerome, I'm going to look to you to help me out here. Thank you. I want to spend some time talking about questions that you might have today. But what's really critical, you should be bored of me saying this by this point, is I really want to focus on questions that are relevant to the largest number of people possible. So if you feel like you have really specific questions, absolutely email them to me at this program funding email address. If you have a question that comes to you after this session, I know that's really common, that you think you couldn't possibly have anything to ask, and then you're doing dishes tonight and you think, oh my goodness, I should have asked that. Absolutely, email me at this email address. And then keep watching that FAQ document, because that's where we'll keep the updated list of questions. We will be updating that right up through October 29th. So please keep an eye on that page. We'll keep it rolling. We'll always let you know how updated it is. So keep asking questions as you have them, throughout this next 5-week period, give or take. So like we mentioned at the top, I think probably what's most manageable with 100 people is to ask you to type any of your questions in the chat. Jerome is going to help me pull out questions to address. And then also, this just helps me have your questions in writing so that then I can put them into that FAQ. When we're doing a lot of things at once, it's hard to do due diligence and make sure that I've written down your question exactly as you're asking it. So having it written in your words is just really helpful for us. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all of you. And then, Jerome, do you have questions you see that I can start answering?
Yes, so I'll just read off the questions so that way everyone can hear. So
could you, sorry to interrupt, could you tell me who it comes from as well?
Sure.
Is that easy to do?
Sure.
Cool,
So
thank you.
our first question is from Caitlin Palumbo. Are we able to set up a meeting with Christy to talk about our application and how can we fit our program into a given focus area and outcome measures?
That's a great question. Thank you, Caitlin, and thanks, Jerome. That's a great one to start with. So unfortunately, I'm happy to answer questions, but to have that one-on-one meeting, and really in the spirit of fairness, I'm just not able to make myself available for that kind of one-on-one assistance. So if you have high-level questions, absolutely send them to me, but especially when you're trying to figure out fit, this is kind of, what I had said when I had my slide deck open, is the best advice I can give you is to really carefully look at those focus areas, the goal, the strategies, and the outcome measures, and then also really be looking at that scoring rubric when you're building your application. So that's a long answer. The short version is feel free to always email me questions, but no, I can't make myself available for like one-on-one, consultation.
So the question from Tim Bowling. How much is being made available to be granted out? How does this amount compare to 2018? And is there a specific amount being allocated to each focus area?
Tim, that's a great question. I will be forthright with you that I don't have those numbers, top of mind right now. Some of it is because it's contingent on our fundraising campaign. Our campaign has kicked off just in the last few weeks. And so some of how much we are able to allocate has to do with how much we raise from the community to give out. So unfortunately, I don't have an exact number. This could be subject to change. So I'm putting a huge disclaimer on this answer right now, is that there is a good chance it will be less than we had to offer during the 2019-2021 funding cycle, just due to, our organization is like many of yours in many ways, is that there have been fundraising challenges as a result of the pandemic. So while there is a chance that it is going to be less, I just can't answer that definitively because we have to see how this cycle, our fundraising campaign goes. So there is a chance, but I can't give you a hard and fast answer. As for how funding is allocated across the focus areas, that is something that is still to be determined within United Way. I have a meeting coming up with my colleagues who oversee our programmatic work in the coming weeks for us to start building that strategy. So it is something that we will know that before we start looking at applications and start, assessing, start building those funding recommendations. But to be as transparent as I can possibly be, that's something that's still in process for us. And so we will build a strategy, but I don't have one yet. And so I have nothing to share with you publicly here.
So from Jen Swain Kilpatrick, can our program extend beyond Erie County? And if it does span multiple counties, should our narrative only focus on the Erie County impact?
Great, thanks, Jen. So we are absolutely willing to fund programs who work in multiple counties. But yes, I think, you've got the sense of us correctly, that we really do want your application we need to make sure that you are in Erie County and also focus your application largely on that part of the narrative. Kind of like I'd said about other pieces before, absolutely, you're okay. And we encourage you to give us a holistic sense of what your program is doing. But because our footprint is Erie County, that's definitely where we're most interested in understanding the work of your program.
So from Chelsea Martin, the character count, is that with or without spaces?
What I feel so like flat-footed. My guess is that is with spaces, but I have to get back to you on that. I would guess it is, but I'll play around in the application this afternoon and I'll definitely put that answer in the FAQ. That's a great question that I had just never thought of before. So I'll get back to all of you on that one.
So from, I'm sorry if I mispronounced this name, Thomas Lajowski. So the RFP states most applicants apply for 15 to 25% of their program budget. Is the intent of United Way funding to supplant current funding for a program in this amount, or should the focus be on expanding/enhancing a current program with grant funds?
I will do my best to answer that question, but that might be something where it would help for us to talk a little bit more afterward. I'm not sure if this is going to be exactly the answer, but a lot of our thought is we want to make sure that we are not like the largest amount of your funding. We want to make sure it's stronger applicants are going to have a more diversified, funding stream, that's not the right phrase, but I hope you know what I'm saying here, a more diversified set source of funding for the application. So the 15 to 25% is really just us saying, we don't want you to rely on us alone. We want to make sure that your program has sustainability built in, so that you're not fully reliant on, or not fully, but largely reliant on one source. I think I don't feel fully confident in this answer. This is a little off the cuff here, but with respect to thinking about, could our funding go toward expansion? I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. I think, again, it just comes down to, we just want to make sure that we're funding programs that have a diverse set of funding underneath them, so that, if one piece of funding were to go away for whatever reason, that wouldn't harm the program's existence, its ability to continue to exist. So I don't know if that's exactly the answer to your question. So if it's not, absolutely send me an email and I'd be happy to talk about it a little bit more.
Deanna Rusick asks, in the last few questions, and I'm assuming this is in the diversity, equity, and inclusion questions, what percentage of senior leadership are ... Please define senior. Would it be only C-level or directors and above?
That's a great question, and I'll make sure to put that in the FAQ as well. To us, senior leadership is C-level executive leadership.
All right, Natalia asks, will funding be distributed equally across program areas?
So that's kind of, like I had mentioned in response to, I believe it was Tim's question, that we are still building that strategy. And so I'm not trying to be cagey. It's just genuinely, that's something we are still working on as an organization coming up with. So I genuinely cannot answer that because it's a strategy that we are still working on building internally.
So Robert asks, for the areas in which you give preference under the focus areas, does the fundability of the program increase the more of those areas your program covers, or do they all have to be addressed to even be considered?
I'm going to open up the chat. That seems like one. I will admit, I'm not always the best at hearing things and interpreting them. So I'm going to pull up the chat and read this myself. So sorry, you're going to watch me read it out loud so I make sure I really understand the question. So we're all in this together, guys. So for the areas in which you give preference under the focus areas, so I would assume that's with respect to the strategies, if I understand the question right. Does the fundability of the program increase the more of those areas your program covers, or do they all need to be addressed to even be considered? So Robert, if I'm understanding your question correctly, and you're referencing the strategies that are underneath each focus area, and we say, tell us, which of these strategies your program uses, it's not necessarily that the more you can check, the better your application will do, because this is kind of, like what I had said when I had my slide deck open, is that it really comes down to how, I can see all your faces now if you want to say it with me, how strong and compelling and comprehensively you're able to explain the way that your program is using that strategy or strategies, however many you choose. So as long as I'm understanding the question right, and absolutely, send me a message afterward if you want to talk about this more, and anything we talk about, like I've said, I'll put in the FAQ, but it's really not necessarily that more is better. It has to do with, the strength of the way you tell the story about how you do that work.
Caitlin Palumbo asks, for the demographic questions, our organization doesn't have extensive data on our clients in all of these areas. We can answer the priority zip codes, but not living in financial hardship. Is there a space to add more context to our answers to these questions?
So Caitlin, that's a great question. And this is definitely getting into one of those places where you can see that, we are really trying to evolve as an organization to meet, the moment. That increasingly for us, it is critical that the programs we fund be able to capture that demographic information. We asked about age, gender, race, ethnicity, and zip code. I believe those are the 4. I don't have this off the top of my head fully. It is critical that we fund programs who either are currently doing that or are close enough that, we can offer a little bit of technical support to get there. So it's really, unfortunately, we don't have extra space built in for that, because this is one of those moments that we're kind of running to move forward to meet the moment in this way. So I recognize, I worry that's a little bit of an unsatisfying answer, but the best I can really say is that it's critical to us that we are funding programs who are able to capture that data or are inches away from being able to do it.
I believe this was addressed. If an organization serves in both the early learning and school age learning focus area, but their service model program carries through both demographics. Can the organization apply for the same program in both focus areas?
Yeah, Jerome, you're right that was something that we covered earlier, and we won't accept multiple applications for one program. So what you'll really want to do is figure out, does your program lean one way more than the other? Trying to figure out where is the fit strongest, and then apply in that area.
I am not seeing any additional questions.
All right. Is there anything else, that? Okay, Deanna, I'm seeing your question come up. I've got the chat open, Jerome, so I can handle this. The PDF of the RFP reads, we will give preference to programs for the following strategies, but when you go into the portal, the same area reads, identifying at least 3 of the strategies. There is a chance, Deanna, that this is an error on our part. I'm going to need to research that a little bit more. What it definitely should say is you have to choose at least 3 outcome measures. Strategies is choose as many fit. So there's a chance that might be a typo that we're seeing in the online application. That's something that I will research. And if that's the case, I'll make sure to have that updated. But what's critical for all of you to know is that the strategies are choose as many as apply. It's the outcome measures where you have to choose at least 3. Okay, I've got. Jerome, what is the chat looking like to you? Are you seeing new questions? I can't tell if I'm seeing something duplicated or not.
So I have a question from Barbara Boos.
Okay.
Is it appropriate for the program to function in part as a pass-through for relevant individualized workforce training that is not currently available via other public resources? The example is a vetting training that may be obtained online.
So that is a good question that starts to get into, if you think of my cruise director metaphor that I used at the start, that's a question that I don't want to answer and be wrong. So I want to talk to my colleague who works in that area, and I will make sure to get back to you with that answer, because that's starting to get specific about programs in a way that I just don't have the depth of knowledge to feel confident in my answer for you. So I'll make sure to get back to you on that one, and I'll share that with the whole group as well. It does look like we have a question about the priority zip codes. So if I understand the question right, this is again one of those that I'm just going to guess that if I'm understanding that we do have those 16 high priority zip codes. And so the question, as I understand it, is that does the fundability of the program increase the more of those areas your program covers? So if you work in 16 zip codes, does that mean you have a better chance of getting funding than if you work in 2? If I'm understanding the question correctly, then no, not necessarily. This is again where like the scoring rubric can guide you, that there's nothing in the scoring rubric that would say that the more zip codes earns you the more points. I feel like I should look at that actually before I say that out loud, but I don't remember that to be so. So I would say look at the scoring rubric to guide you. I was going to keep talking, and honestly, I'm going to stop myself so I can really research that answer before I say the wrong thing. But my knee-jerk instinct is really let the rubric guide you there. But that's another great question, and it's a place, let me really look at the RFP to make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn, and I'll get back to you with that answer. These have been great questions. I'm really thrilled with the types of things that you're interested in knowing more about. And it really helps us think about how do we, when we do this next time, how do we strengthen our application? How do we make it even easier to understand? So this has been great so far. Are there any other questions that you have top of mind that I can answer for you today? I know the silence feels awkward, but I also know that it's so easy on a Zoom to be like, wait 2 seconds. Oh, there's no questions. So I'm really leaning into the awkwardness of it for a minute just to make sure that there's nothing else coming. But it seems like we're good. So I'm going to remind you all again, if you have questions for me at any point, absolutely. Oh, I have one more coming up. If you have questions for me after this session, email me at programfunding@uwbec.org, and I will absolutely do my best to answer your questions, within the limits of my capacity. I'll talk to my colleagues, and, we're certainly here to be a support for you. It looks like, Rachel, your question about outcome measures for educational focus areas is a specific one that I'll talk to my colleague about, and I'll make sure to include that as well. So I'll get back to you and the whole group on that. So thank you so much, everyone. You've been a great group. I hope this was helpful for you. Like I said at the top, I'm learning right alongside you. United Way is learning right alongside you. But thank you again, and we'll have this posted to our website hopefully this afternoon. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Do you want to just start? Do you have the ability to? Oh, I think it's working now. Great. Can you stop the recording too?